Hi, my name is Glenn K. Bard, Chief Technical Officer of PATC Tech and retired Pennsylvania State Trooper. What I'm here to talk to you about today is ransomware, what it is, how it can infect your computer systems, how it can defend against it, and what to do if unfortunately you are the victim of this ransomware itself. So what is ransomware? It's a malware that infects a computer system and then holds the data hostage until a ransom is paid. There's many types of these different ransomwares out there. I'm sure we've all seen a couple of them, and we've definitely seen them in the news, but we probably don't have an idea of how many different types of ransomwares do exist. One of them, a very common one, is called scareware. Now what this is where you'll go to a web page or you'll get an alert and it simply says that the FBI or another law enforcement agency has identified your computer system as being the subject of a crime. And what will happen is a scareware will interfere with you being able to open up different types of files, programs, or even inhibit your antivirus function until you pay that fine. So this is one that it's not what we're used to seeing where our data is encrypted. It pretty much gets in the way of our operating system and our programs, so we can't use them the way that we need to. And it's not saying I'm a bad guy, you need to pay me. It's saying that they're the FBI and that they think a computer system from this location was used to commit a crime. So this is one of these different types of ransomwares that we are getting that we have commonly referred to as scareware. Now, some other ones you may have seen. One of them is where they may encrypt the user files and demand payment for that decryption key. This is probably the most common one we have seen. What will happen is you'll get an alert that the files are all encrypted, and unless you pay that fine, you're not going to get that encryption key to go ahead and open those files back up. Some of them don't even do that, though. A couple of them out there will actually say that they have gotten your data, and unless you pay them, they're going to release or publish that data. So they're not keeping you from the data. They're not encrypting it and making it so you can't get to it. What they're doing is actually taking it and saying, here's your data, you can keep using it, but if you don't pay us, we're going to give it to the world. And that could be devastating for many of our companies, because imagine it being a hospital or doctor's records or insurance claims, that information then being released to the outside world. That could be a huge issue. So we do have these different types of ransomware. So how do we actually figure out which ones are which? Well, there's four main types of ransomwares. One is the encrypting ransomware. This is where it makes the data inaccessible due to the encryption. This is probably the most common one where we have seen. It just simply enough makes it so that we can't get into it. Another one is this non-encrypting, and it oftentimes displays pornography and restricts access to the operating system. What will happen is you'll see something appear, and it'll be pornographic images or videos, and until you pay it, it will not go away and will not let you get into the operating system or any of your programs or files. It's a little bit easier to defeat because it is not encrypting anything, but it can definitely be a nuisance. And the problem is, even if we can get around it that one time, it may still be on that computer system. Another one is called leakware. And this leakware, what it does is it tells us that if we don't pay it, we're going to go ahead and have to deal with it being published, and it could be very sensitive data. And then finally, we have the mobile ransomware, and this displays a message blocking the data and the applications so they can't be accessed. So those are your true four different types that we have right there. That scareware that I showed you moments ago, that falls into the non-encrypting. It's making you have to pay a ransom to get it out of the way so you can access it. The leakware, this is one that a lot of people are afraid of, and rightfully so, because nobody wants that data to be released. That could be very detrimental, especially if you are in a situation where it's very sensitive data itself. Mobile devices obviously getting very, very large and being the target of different types of attacks and so on. And then we have the original one, the encrypting one, that's still out there and still around. So we do have these different types of them out there, and they're going to continue to evolve and grow as we become more and more dependent upon our data. Now, the payment is usually demanded in a digital, what we call cryptocurrency, such as Bitcoin. And there's many other types of cryptocurrencies out there. And the thing about it is that depending on which of the ransomwares we get will depend on which of the cryptocurrencies we have to pay with, because there's many out there. Bitcoin is one we all know, but there's so many other ones like Ethereum and Litecoin and so on, and they can take any of those for the payments. However, making that payment is not always the best answer. In fact, most experts are saying to not make that payment. It's for a few reasons. One of them is because if you make that payment, you're trusting that the bad guy is going to give you the correct key to decrypt your data. Secondly, all you're doing is telling that person that you are going to pay. So it's going to stop them from doing it a second and third time. Third, the issue may be that it's one of the ransomwares that cannot decrypt the data. There are a few of them out there, which we'll touch on, that once the data is encrypted, they have no way of decrypting it. They're just taking your money. So, and then fourth, and what's very important, what I always have an issue with, just because you paid that ransom doesn't mean that the ransomware is gone from that computer system. So paying it isn't always necessarily the best idea. Now, what are some of the ones we've seen throughout time? We're talking just the last couple of years. The first big one was called CryptoLocker in 2013. It used infected email payloads and took an estimated $30 million from victims. Not to be outdone, the next year in 2014, CryptoWall came about. Once again, used phishing emails with links to sites with infected downloads, estimated 18 million from victims. WannaCry came out in 2017. It used security vulnerabilities in Windows, including code to scan for vulnerable systems and infect those. Also, believed by some groups to be linked to North Korea, losses estimated to be in the hundreds of millions. And these are three well-known ones right here. That's why I put these three first. But how about a couple other lesser-known ones that may be even a little bit more scary, like Petya, for instance. Petya, 2016, targeted Windows computer systems. They infected the master boot record, or MBR, and encrypted the entire file system, blocking the computer from booting in any way, shape, or form. Now, the next year in 2017, not Petya came out. It used similar exploits as before. However, it was reported that no matter what you did, paying the ransom or not, it was unable to revert its own encryption actions, no matter what. So what this was simply enough where they were encrypting it and unfortunately had no way of decrypting it. So everybody who paid that ransom still had to deal with the fact their data was inaccessible. And the one that I think is probably the scariest is one called Jigsaw. 2016 it came out, and what it did was it encrypted the compromised files and then progressively deleted more and more files if the ransom wasn't paid. At 1 hour, it deleted one file, and it continued going on, deleting more and more files until 72 hours, at which point, if the ransom hadn't been paid in 72 hours, it would delete all remaining files on that computer system. So that's a terrifying one. And now we even have a different type out there that's called RAAS. And what RAAS is ransomware as a service. Now what this means is simply enough that people are selling ransomware in places like the dark web for non-computer savvy cyber criminals. So a lot of these people who wanted to jump into the ransomware area of cybercrime, they don't all have the capability of writing the code for it. So what they do now is go onto the dark web using something like Tor, I2P, Freenet, and so on, and they find someone to write the code for them. They purchase it, and then they can use this. And basically, it's a ransomware as a service. And this is kind of based off of what we always call the cloud services, where we have infrastructures and so on in the cloud. and it makes it so the person using it doesn't have to really be the most tech savvy. It's the same thing. This is a ransomware as a service, so the cyber criminal doesn't have to be that tech savvy, but can still use the ransomware. So there's a lot of these things coming about. And even when I was making this presentation for you guys, funny enough, I got an alert, and that alert happened to be from one of my antiviruses. And it was just the other day, a few days ago, and it says that ransomware is on the rise. And I think we all know that and agree with that ransomware is coming about and getting bigger and bigger. How's it spreading? A lot of times it is spreading through our emails and attachments in our emails. That seems to be one of the most commonplace ways of becoming infected with this. But it can honestly now, with this RAAS, ransomware as a service, it can be passed and infected in so many different ways. It's almost crazy. So what we really got to do is really focus on things like, how do we start protecting ourselves? Well, again, one very important note is that making the payment of the ransomware probably isn't the best answer. Now, I don't want to tell you yes or no without looking at every single circumstance on a case-by-case basis. I would be very, very remiss if I were to do that, and I would never want to make that statement without looking at the entire situation. But for the most part, again, most of us, we do agree that paying it is probably not the best answer. And we can see, again, why right here. The first one, you're trusting the person to actually return that data to you. This is a person that's already infected your computer system. He's already a cyber criminal, and now we're trusting him to give us the correct decryption key. Probably not a great idea. The other thing, it doesn't remove the original threat. That decryption will allow you to get that data if it does work. However, it doesn't remove it. It may come back in 2 days after that. So that could be a huge issue right there for us. And lastly, all we've done when we pay that is just told that person or told that entity that we are going to pay the bill. So what's to stop them from coming back 2 days later and doing it again? So that's going to be an issue we want to do. So what we're going to do is make sure, how do we learn how to protect ourselves? I'm going to give you guys some tips and tricks. Not only for you as a user, but also for your IT staff, and also some tips and tricks for what happens if, heaven forbid, we do become a victim of a ransomware. So first off, as a user, what's the first thing we can start doing to prepare ourselves, protect ourselves? The biggest one is always backup. I tell all of my clients this on a daily basis: back up, and back up. Because here's the thing, if you back up that data, a ransomware becomes an annoyance and not an emergency. And that's a big deal. It really is. If we have that backed up, we can blow that back out, and then be able to go ahead and have our data back. It may take a few days, and it may take a little bit of time and money. However, it's going to be a lot more economical than if we were to do something like have to start over again. So we want to make sure to always back up. Now, when backing up, we have to make sure you always have 3 copies of data. This is going to be your best practices of all different types of backing up. We want to make sure we have 3 copies of it. Number 1 is the working copy, the copy that you're using on a daily basis. That's going to be the one that's most obvious to us, the one that we have access to every day. The second one is a physical backup that's going to be there at your location. That way, if something happens, we have a physical backup we can pull from, and it's usually stored on a server or external drives, so on like that. The third one is a cloud backup. That one's going to be very vital in a situation where a crypto wall or some type of ransomware hits your network. Because if we did hit with a ransomware and it's able to spread throughout the network, if that physical backup is still attached, it may encrypt it as well. So that cloud backup is going to be vital for us to be able to defeat any type of issues that we may have. If we have a situation where only one computer system is encrypted with a ransomware, the physical backup may be a great situation for us to go ahead and recover from it as well. So we have these 3 different types of data, and it helps us be able to recover from the ransomware. So always make sure we have 3 copies of the data. One of them is the working copy, one of them is the physical backup locally, one of them is the cloud backup. Always make sure we have the 3. Now, a lot of people ask me, if I have a cloud backup, why do I worry about a physical backup? Well, first off, because of time. If I have a situation where I have a terabyte of data and I'm hit with some type of ransomware and I have a physical backup located here in the office, I can restore that a lot faster than you could download a terabyte of data from a cloud. So we always want to make sure and do that. Secondly, most best practices do call for both a physical and a cloud backup. So we want to make sure and always abide by the best practices. So that's going to be your most important thing right there, is always back up. Get a good backup system. Make sure it's in place, make sure it's done automatically, and it can go through. And for you guys who are very big into computer systems, you'll know you have different types of backups: a full backup, an incremental backup, a differential backup. And a good backup system is going to allow us to keep those different data sets and make sure we can recover from our ransomwares. So that's your first thing, is prepare for it. Unfortunately, I hate to say it, most of us are going to be subject to some type of attack at some point in our careers. If we are prepared, again, it will be an annoyance and not a crisis. So that is going to be a great thing to do right there. The next thing we want to do is make sure and use a good antivirus and a firewall on our computer system. Here's the thing. Most of our new computer systems already have these things as they get shipped to you. Make sure and activate them. But if you get one that has an antivirus you don't like and you want to put a different on there, that's okay. Just make sure it's a reliable antivirus itself. Make sure it's one of the main companies, the people who are doing this for a living. Be very careful about using any of these new antiviruses that you haven't heard of or haven't been tested. Also, all of the new operating systems have great firewalls. Windows and Mac both have really good firewalls installed in their operating systems. Make sure they're turned on, make sure they are logging. We've got to make sure to do that, because a firewall, what it does is it helps us by monitoring our data flow, and it helps us protect ourselves. So why wouldn't we want to use that? Now, your network may have a firewall in place as well, and that's great. And your IT guys, they can be the ones to tell you yes or no, it is or isn't, and whether or not you need it on your local machine. But the one thing I do caution you on is when you go out and you start taking your laptop with you to different clients, different locations, and so on, make sure that your firewall on that machine is then turned on when you're not inside of your network. Because when you walk out, that may be an issue that it's not protected anymore behind that network firewall. So when you walk out and you go to your client's office, you go to a restaurant to meet a client, to go over their case, whatever it is, make sure your firewall is turned on. That way, we can be prepared in case something does try to attack you while you're not inside of that network. Also, keep your software up to date. And this is outside of just your antivirus, but things like your operating system, Windows and Mac OS, obviously. And not only that, but also certain programs you're using on your computer system. Adobe and Java, they seem to be two of the different softwares that a lot of different viruses and malwares do attack. Probably because all of us have both of them on all of our computer systems. Adobe being PDF, obviously many of us use it every single day. Java being the ability to look at those nice videos and pretty web pages and so on. So because we are all using them, they are going to be a situation where they'll be a target of the attack. So we want to make sure to keep those up to date. And also make sure when you do the updates on them, we're getting them from reliable sources. We don't want to make a mistake and update them from any place other than directly from the source itself. So make sure and keep your software up to date. Also, keep a separate email account for each, your professional and personal life. This kind of makes sense, but a lot of people don't do this. They'll use one or the other for both. And you shouldn't do that. You want to make sure and keep your accounts separate. And when you're doing this and you have a personal bank account, make sure you use that with your personal email address. And when you have a professional bank account, make sure and keep that one on your professional email address. That will avoid any confusion. So especially if they are separate banks, we want to make sure and have separate email accounts for both our professional and personal life, and definitely keep them separate. That was going to help us be able to figure out and weed out if we may be a target of some type of malware attack. Also, don't open emails from unknown senders. I know sometimes that's hard, but here's a couple hints for you. First off, law enforcement isn't going to try to arrest you via email. It doesn't happen that way. I worked in the cyber unit for years. Never once did I email someone telling them to arrest them over email. No one does that. Also, the IRS is not going to send you a refund via email. And lastly, no hitman has been hired to kill you, and even if they were, they wouldn't be emailing you telling you so. So when you start seeing these emails that look crazy, it's because they are. Don't click on them. Don't open them. The director of the FBI is not emailing you. The director of Interpol is not emailing you. The director of the IRS is not emailing you. So don't open those types of emails. It's that simple. Don't click on attachments from unknown senders. Clicking on that attachment may be exactly what initiates the malware itself. I know we all love seeing attachments. I know we all love getting emails with something in them. But the thing about it, you want to be very careful with these attachments. That's how most of these ransomwares are spread, is via these attachments. So don't click on them, especially if it's from an unknown sender. We definitely have to make it a point to not click on them if it's from an unknown sender. Also, go through and personalize your anti-spam settings in your own email account. You want to start blocking certain things. One thing you definitely want to block is any attachments with an audit extension such as a .exe, .vbs, .scr. You want to make sure and block those. Get rid of anything with that type of attachment. Also, make sure that if you are getting zip or RAR files, which are just simply compressed files, make sure that your antivirus is able to scan inside of those zip and RAR files. If it isn't able to scan inside there, you definitely don't want to start opening those up. Obviously, you can have programs inside of these zip and RAR files, and by clicking on them would just be a terrible thing to do, and it could unleash the malware across your network. So that's a big one. This is definitely an important one. Make sure and set up your anti-spam setting in your email account. Block any attachments that don't make sense, like an exe, a VBS, or an SCR. And also make sure that even if you are getting your zip files and RAR files sent to you, that your antivirus is able to scan inside of them. If not, do not accept them, do not download them, do not open them. Simple enough. Here's a couple other really important ones. When traveling, alert your IT staff. If you're going to go away on vacation, make sure your IT staff knows about this. Most of us don't take the time to do this, and it could be very important. Number one, they can put an alert on your account. They can monitor it and make sure what's happened. Heaven forbid you go on vacation, leave your laptop in a hotel room, and someone gets access to it. So we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that our IT staff knows when we are on vacation. They can also make it so that you could still log in and check your work information if necessary, maybe through a desktop access or even a VPN. That way, you're going to protect yourself and your network, and it helps your IT guys be prepared to do this for you. So that's a big one that I see a lot of people forget to do. Always make sure and alert your IT staff of when you may be going on a vacation or not being in the office. So make sure we do something along those lines right there. All right, so we want to make sure and that's done every time. When you're also traveling, a few more things to think about. turn off your Wi-Fi and Bluetooth adapters. You know, most of us just grab our laptop and we put it in sleep mode, put it in a laptop bag and travel. Don't do that. Turn off your Wi-Fi and Bluetooth adapters completely. Consider using your phone as a hotspot. That's what I do. I take my phone, I plug it in, and I use it as a hotspot. I know that nobody else is on my phone accessing the internet. So we want to make sure that we are able to go ahead and do that. Avoid open Wi-Fi. I know we all love that open Wi-Fi, but please make it a point and avoid that open Wi-Fi. That's just one of the things that you want to make sure and do. Of course, any bad guy out there can be sitting there waiting and just using that open Wi-Fi to exploit and go after your computer system. And then turn off file sharing. This is another big one people forget. Most of us in our offices, we have file sharing turned on. Well, then all of a sudden you go to a hotel and you have file sharing turned on, that may open you up as well. So we want to make sure that we do turn off our file sharing. That way it doesn't allow for someone else to access our data. Now, some tips for the IT staff. If you are part of the IT staff, or if you're a small company and basically you're doing the IT and the work itself, here are some good hints for you. Once again, back up everything, not just the machines, but also the servers. Make sure you have a good backup system in place. Again, this can make a ransomware hit an annoyance as opposed to a full-blown crisis. And when we do this, we still have to make sure and stick by our 3 copies of data: the working, the physical backup, and of course the cloud backup. That can be very, very helpful and important to us. Some other things about IT staff. Make sure and set up some sensible user restrictions. Now, I am a firm believer that we should be trusting our employees, no doubt about that. However, we still need to go ahead and make some sensible restrictions. Block installing applications at certain locations on the computers. You know, a lot of these malwares and ransomwares, they will install in locations that aren't the normal program files. So we can set up some sensible restrictions that block that sort of thing. Also, only allow for installation of useful approved software. We don't want to have all different types of software installed on the computer system. So one very beneficial thing to do is only allow for certain types of software to be installed. That kind of makes sense. You know, we all need to have certain things on our computer systems, whether it be the different office applications, different types of web browsers, because many of us do different things that require different types of browsers, like say Chrome or Firefox, whatever it is. But make sure that we do have sensible restrictions in place. That way, it's going to be able to allow us to still support the staff, still support the employees, but also protect the data itself. All right. Also for IT, we got to make sure that we do our job as well, and that is make sure and update the servers and machines. If you are blocking anything from being installed on the user's machines, that means that we would have to go through and do it ourselves. Make sure they are up to date. I saw some statistics recently that one of the most common types of ransomwares out there, what it was going after was the Windows 7 computers. And I know Windows 7 is an amazing operating system, and a lot of us still like using Windows 7. The problem with it is that there were several vulnerabilities, and it's been out so long that our bad guys are using those vulnerabilities to get into them. So even though many people don't want to update, even though it's been out for years now, it's still a good idea to update to the Windows 10 computers and even keep those updates going as well. So we want to make sure to do that. Additionally, make sure the servers, that's the one thing I see the most of. I get called into different networks a lot to take a look at security and so on, and I still see people using software on their servers. It's so outdated, it's incredible. So you got to make it a point to not only update the machines, but update the servers as well. That's going to be a big thing for us that we need to pay attention to. Also, this one may be a little bit odd to ask, but it's a really good, helpful one. And that is to make sure that you can see file extensions on all your files. Because if we can do that and we start looking at it, we can see it's a .docx. We know it's a Windows document. We can see it's a .xlsx. We know it's an Excel spreadsheet document. Well, the thing about it is that a lot of these different malwares, they hide themselves and make it look like one type of file, but in reality, it's something completely different. You can very easily change the icon on a file to be something else. Well, that's an issue. So what we're going to do is make sure and show our file extensions. That way, we can train the people in the offices. We can train the workers. Hey, if you happen to see something that looks like a Word document but it has a .exe, do not double click on that. Do not open that file. If it looks like a PDF but has a .whatever, do not open that file. That way, it's going to help us be able to help the staff realize that. There's not really too many reasons not to do this. Showing file extensions is very simple, very easy. It's just a setting on your Windows computer system, and that will help us so that we can start training the people inside the network to be better prepared to identify a Trojan or some type of ransomware hiding on that computer system. Also, turn off autoplay. I know all of us love downloading things and it immediately start to play. And that's a terrible, terrible, terrible idea. Because if we do that, unfortunately, what's going to happen is as soon as it's downloaded, it can be embedded inside of some type of file and immediately start to play. And once that happens, we've now infected our computer system. So turn off autoplay. Make it so that the person has to intentionally double click and start that file. That way, we have one more layer of checking on, okay, is this truly what I want? And when you combine this with showing the file extensions, we now have two more layers because the person, say it's a video, they download the video the old-fashioned way, it automatically plays, it's the ransomware, it takes over the machines, no way to stop it. We show the file extension, turn off autoplay, the person downloads it, they look at the video, it's now got an exe or some other type of file extension on it. That's the first hint right there, and it didn't start playing because they had to download it and then double click it because we turned off autoplay. So that's going to be a very, very important one for us right there as well. Make sure we can do that. Also, set up content scanners on your email servers. Make sure, once again, you can scan the contents of zip and RAR compressed files. I know many of us need to get those types of files. Well, the thing about it, make sure that we can scan the contents of them. And again, block any email attachments with those exe, VBS, SCR, and so many other different types of extensions as well. We always want to go ahead and do that. And probably the most important one of all, make sure to educate your employees. I can't tell you how many times I have talked to staff at different locations and said, well, has the IT guys told you what to look for, not what not to look for? And they've always told me no. The IT staff are the experts. We need to rely upon them to be the ones that tell us what to download and what not to download. It's crazy we don't listen to them. We've got to start listening to them. And the IT staff, additionally as well, they need to start stepping up and making presentations. Take 15 minutes, make a PowerPoint, and put in there, don't open this, don't do that, don't click on this, and if so, let me know. But I can't tell you how many companies I go to where the IT staff does not work with the employees and vice versa to educate on what is happening inside of that company. Not only do we need to educate the employees, we need to listen to the employees. What is needed, what isn't needed. If something isn't needed, turn it off. That way, we're not going to have another way of being compromised. If something is needed, like they do need to have Chrome on a computer system, well, then put it on there and do it through the IT staff. That way the employee can't make a mistake and mess it up. So we need to continue to educate our employees. That way they can go ahead and count upon the information given to them. And that's going to be a big thing right there. Also, start thinking about inspecting these take-home and BYOD machines. Here's the thing. Most of our IT staff is great, and they do a great job of protecting that network and making sure nothing gets inside that network. But what happens when a person takes their computer system home and it's outside of that network? Or what happens if we have this BYOD, bring your own device, phone, laptop, whatever, into the network? Well, most home users aren't using reliable firewalls, antivirus utilities, and so on like that. So the AT department needs to be able to go ahead and start looking at what's taking place on these devices. Maybe inspect them, have certain rules about what can be brought into them, and even things like you can't bring an older type of computer system in. You can't bring a Vista computer system in, and so on like that, because they're just not that safe and reliable anymore. So we need to make sure the IT staff does have the capability to look at what's being brought into and introduced into that network if your company does have these different types of take-home machines or BYOD devices as well. Now, what happens if you are infected? Unfortunately, that may happen. The reality of it is that we may get infected. There's no doubt about that. So what's the first thing we do? First thing, immediately turn off the internet and the network connections. That's going to help us from stopping that malware from replicating and sent out to our clients and even other machines inside the network. Heaven forbid that this come in through an email and we leave it open and running and it gets sent back out to our clients, because now not going to have to do just the repercussions of what took place inside your network, but also look at how your clients are going to change their view of your company. That could be huge. That could be devastating. We don't want that to go out. And then we get a bad reputation on not being secure. And even worse yet, imagine if it does replicate, it does get sent out to our clients, and now our client's network is shut down. They're going to sue. So we have to be very, very careful that if we do come across a situation where we've been infected, get that device off the internet and off the network connections. That way it does isolate it. Immediately notify the appropriate personnel. Contact, the supervisors, the IT staff, the legal counsel, and so on, because a fast response can help isolate and minimize that infection. We want to make sure and do that. So, first thing you happen to see, you're infected, pull that cable, get that thing off that network, get it off the internet, and immediately call the IT staff and so on like that. IT staff, they need to turn off file sharing. We got to make sure it's done. Now, if you pulled that plug and got it off the internet, that's going to take care of it anyway. But the IT staff, what they need to do is not just turn off file sharing from that one machine, but file sharing from all the machines. Because maybe it did get to one or two other machines into the network, but hasn't unveiled itself yet. Well, let's go ahead and turn off the file sharing to make sure that even if it did come in from one machine and go to two other ones that we don't know about yet, turn off its file sharing. That way it stops it and it tracks. So that would be a big one for us right there. We always got to make sure and do that. And then, of course, we want to make sure and contact our legal department. The reason why is because simply enough, if data is compromised, a legal response may be necessary. There are laws in place, of course, that if any person's data is compromised, they may need to be notified of this. Also, if you're working with other entities, other organizations where they may have become a victim because of it, we need to notify them as well. We don't want to open ourselves up to any more liability than has already taken place. And this is also going to help us to be able to show that, listen, we were victimized by this this malware virus. However, we took every step possible to defend our other clients, customers, and so on like that. So we want to make sure And always contact our legal, contact someone who is well versed in this. You may have an attorney there on staff, but he or she may not be familiar with the laws about intrusions and so on like that, but I'm sure he or she would know somebody who is. So that's what we got to do. Protect ourselves. Make sure the IT staff knows when you're traveling. If you're infected, get it off that network, notify the appropriate personnel. Most importantly is create a backup. Backup everything. That's going to be the biggest thing you could possibly ever need to do. If you guys ever have any questions or need anything, feel free to contact me. Here is my email address. Here is my phone number, and we will be glad to help you guys out in any way we possibly can.